Welcome to the self-learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we start Unit 4, Theories of War, and we start with topic Theories of Causes of War. And we are going to discuss state level analysis. State level analysis focuses on the nation state and the internal process of the state as the key determinant of world politics. This is a state centric approach to international relations, while the earlier system level analysis believed that the state behavior is a product of the compulsions of the system. This approach believes that the states have a far greater independence in their decision making. There would be both structural and non structural determinants to making of policy. The structural would refer to the nature of government, while the later to the history and political culture of the state. Authoritarian governments and democratic governments would differ in the way policy is formulated. Similarly, policies in times of crisis and in times of peace would also be different. At the state level analysis, the causes of war are located in the following situations. Supremacy of national interest has been considered as a central driving force at this level. National interest would operate at two levels. One is a war to ensure the survival of the nation state if attacked by the enemy. A second level is that of an expansionist national interest, where extending of frontiers is considered a security related national interest. Israel has seen both the situations. The 1948 war may be described as a war for survival, while the later wars of 1967 and 1973 saw the expansion of territory for security reasons. A linkage is sought to be established between domestic politics and foreign policy. It is sometimes argued that nations go in for war to divert domestic attention elsewhere. There is yet another analysis that focuses on the linkage between the type of country and the likelihood of becoming aggressive. It has been argued that democratic societies are less likely to opt for war than authoritarian ones. We discuss the third individual level analysis. The motto of UNESCO is since wars begin in the minds of the men, it is in this the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. Individual level analysis focuses on human nature and therefore the psychological factors that contribute to decision making. It also focuses on the biological factors to understand the aggressive tendency of man. Whether human beings are naturally aggressive is a question that is asked quite often. Biopolitics examines the relationship between physical nature and political behavior. Mention must be made of the feminist approaches to international relations that argue that the aggressive human behavior is essentially a male trait. Yet another dimension of the individual level analysis is related to group behavior. Why do mobs turn violent? It is argued that the individuals may not show aggressive behavior, but when they are part of a riotous mob, they are likely to commit atrocities that they, in their individual capacities, would have never committed. Perhaps the most significant contribution to this level of analysis is done with reference to leadership behavior. A study of John F. Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis, of Lal Bahadur Shastri during the 1965 Indo-Pak War, or Indira Gandhi in the context of the Bangladesh War are part of an attempt to understand leadership behavior. Similarly, peace initiatives such as that of Anwar Sadat towards Israel, the opening up of a dialogue with China by President Richard Nixon, or the shuttle diplomacy of Henry Kissinger are all examples of leadership behavior. Causes of war at individual level analysis are located in the following: a rational decision taken by the leader, a conscious decision to go for a war for the protection of national interest is cited as one of the important reasons. The argument here is that even if the situation is ripe for a war, in the final analysis the decision is made by an individual leader, as President Kennedy would have argued. The buck stops here. The opposite of this is a theory that would question the rationality argument. A decision to go for a war may be an entirely irrational decision of the leadership. Some biologists seek roots of war in human aggressive tendencies. Much of the theorizing in this realm is based on animal experimentation. There has been a lot of literature in this area since the time of Darwin's writing on the subject. Psychologists look to frustration, misperception, and attitude change to understand stimuli that leads to aggressive behavior. Freud, for example, stresses his belief in human instinct for violence or destruction, an instinct balanced by one for love or life. Now we discuss idealist view of war. Political idealism came to dominate international relations during the interwar years. Political idealists believed in the inherent goodness of human beings and argued that human beings generally sought warfare of others as well as themselves. The idealists believed that bad structural and institutional arrangements on a worldwide basis created bad human behavior. War, according to them, was not inevitable, but was a product of the bad structural arrangements. The idealists therefore argued that war could be prevented through the creation of proper international structures. These structures were cooperative international institutions. The League of Nations had been one of the most important of them to be established after the First World War. The principle of collective security was the operative methodology through which it would be possible to avoid wars. The principle of collective security required joint action and a commitment on part of all the participating states. Some idealist thinkers argued in favor of the rule of international law as a means of avoiding wars. In this scheme, nations would denounce war as an instrument of national policy. Still, other idealist thinkers looked at arms race as the source of conflict. Consequently, they favored a systematic dismantling of the arms race and supported the policy of disarmament. Next view is realist view of war. The failure of the League of Nations and the slow but inevitable march towards yet another world war brought about a critique of the idealist approach. While the idealist approach had focused on the role of international law, international organization, interdependence, and cooperation as the key features of international relations, the realist focused on the power politics, security dilemma of the nations, aggression, conflict, and war. Hans Mcgill's six principles of realism present the most clear articulation of the realist position. These well known principles briefly are: politics is rooted in a permanent and unchanging human nature, which is basically self centered, self regarding, and self interested. The essence of politics is the struggle for power. Similarly, international politics is criticized by the struggle for national power between the states. While the forms and nature of state power are not fixed, but vary in time, place, and context, the concept of interest remains consistent. While individuals are influenced by moral and ethical implications, states are not moral agents, since their action has to be judged by the criteria of national survival. Those states will endeavor to cover their behavior in ethical terms. It is designed to confer advantage and legitimacy and to further the national interest of the state. The political sphere is autonomous from every other sphere of human concern. It has its own standards of thought and criteria for analysis of state behavior. Morgenthau argues that the concept of national interest presupposes neither a naturally harmonious world nor the inevitability of war. If all nations pursued their national interest, the system would be relatively stable, with the balance of power mechanisms keeping potential problems in check. The realists advocate the maintenance of capable military force and emphasize on nationalism. Realism asserts the primary of the nation state and argues that national security was the most important international issue. The difference between realism and neo-realism was that neo-realism argues that states are power seeking and security conscious, but not because of human nature in itself, but because the structure of international system compels them to be so. Thus, while state leaders and their subjective valuations of international relations are at the center of attention, in realist theory, the neo-realism focuses on the structure of the system, in particular the relative distribution of power. Actors are less important because structures compel them to act in certain ways. Now we wind up this lecture and thank you so much for your attention.